Hello and welcome to Theta Sigma's Doctor Who podcast number 67. Firstly, can I apologise for the lack of a show last week. Sadly, I was ill all over the weekend, and with a break booked for the Monday, I just wanted to focus on getting better so that I could travel. Can I thank Andrew Marmot and Facebook pages Doctor Who Memes of Escape and Doctor Who Original Classic Episodes for your kind thoughts and good wishes. But here we are, back up and running after a fantastic breakaway in the wonderful city of Edinburgh, and if you've not yet been there, I thoroughly recommend that you do so soon. This week, the missing episode. No, not those missing episodes. The missing podcast that I was due to record a few weeks back in our series looking at some of the less well-remembered classic series aliens. In this, the fourth of the series, we're looking at the insectoid Wirrn.
The dawn was near. No one knew why it always happened at dawn. But that was the way it used to be. The way of nature. The way it had to be.
The Wirrn are an insectoid race that made their debut in the 1975 Fourth Doctor story The Ark in Space. They claim to have originated from Andromeda, although whether they actually meant the galaxy, the constellation, or even a planet named Andromeda is unclear, but they were driven into space by human settlers. They're slightly larger than humans, dark green and wasp-like in appearance. They mostly live in space, although their breeding colonies are terrestrial. Their bodies are a self-contained system, roughly human-sized, although with an anatomy more like that of an Earth-based insect. Their heads are made up of two large golden eyes, long floppy antennae, and three small mandibles. Underneath the head were larger mandibles which they used to talk. They communicated by squeaking, though at least one was able to speak human languages. The head was attached to a long thorax, which had 6 arms attached to it. Though thin, these arms were as strong as a human's and could be used for similar tasks. Underneath the thorax was a long abdomen. The Wirrn lived in space for most of their lives, and thus they could recycle their waste products with special enzymes, allowing them to survive without fresh air for years. They would only occasionally land on planets to gather air and food and to breed. While in an area with gravity, the Wirrn somehow moved on their abdomen. In space, on the other hand, the Wirrn just dragged themselves along with their arms. Given their apparently non-technological nature, it's unclear how they were able to make planetfall without burning up on entering an atmosphere, let alone launch themselves back into space or travel intergalactic distances. The Wirrn are a tough species, able to survive a wide variety of environments, energy blasts, and apparently diamond-tipped blades. The Wirrn's most important weakness, however, was their vulnerability to electricity. Wirrn had an unusual life cycle which was shown on the TV story The Ark in Space. They started breeding with a queen, who searched for a suitable planet. The Wirrn used cattle-like creatures in the Andromeda galaxy, but they could also substitute humans. When the queen found a suitable host, it laid an egg in that host. The larva gained all the race memories of the Wirrn, as well as the host's knowledge, eventually eating its way out of the host. This larvae was large, green and slug-like, with several small limbs. The larvae, while not as tough as an adult, were still resistant to a large amount of damage. If damaged, they could simply shed their skin, revealing an undamaged skin underneath. The larvae produced green slime which could infect other creatures, turning them into larvae as well. These infected individuals gained all the knowledge of the Wirrn and the previous host. Eventually the larva started to metamorphosize, creating a large pupa. After a few hours, full-grown Wirrn came out of the pupae and set about to do the bidding of the swarm. One of these adult Wirrn, generally the first one infected, would become the swarm leader and control the actions of the other larvae which were infested at the same time. Some would also be turned into secondary queens, allowing them to lay eggs in more hosts. The Wirrn have had a presence in the universe for a long time. According to the TV story The Stones of Blood, a dead Wirrn was found in a prison ship that launched in 2000 BC. According to the novel Placebo Effect, the Wirrn left the Andromeda Galaxy at some point before the end of the 40th century, looking for a new source of hosts. They eventually made their way to the Mutter's Spiral, where they occasionally infested the odd planet. As they gained new hosts, they were able to learn about the political structure, allowing them to plan out an invasion. Eventually they reached the Earth, where they were able to infest Miles Mason. Using his connections and scientific skills, they were able to produce drugs to be given to the athletes of the Olympics which would infect them. Those who weren't infected immediately would then return to their home planets and infect the others. The Swarm Queen then moved to Micawber's world to better organise the swarm. She converted the people who came to investigate the tunnels of Micawber's world, adding to the swarm. The Reverend Lucas of the Church of the Way Forward picked up her telepathic communications, and he believed that she was his goddess. Using the murder of Duchess of Auckland as a distraction, the drug was then activated. Unfortunately for the Wirrn, however, the Space Security Service was prepared and ready to drive back the larvae. The swarm was eventually stopped when the 8th Doctor confronted the Queen, exposing the wiring of Micawber's world and electrocuting her. Despite this, some of the larvae escaped and stole a ship, instinctively escaping back to the Andromeda Galaxy. The body of the Queen was taken by the Reverend Lucas, who wanted to spread his goddess's message throughout the galaxy. TV story The Ark in Space explains that thousands of years later the humans first reached the Andromeda Galaxy and started to expand there, destroying the Wirrn breeding colonies along the way. After thousands of years of fighting between the two species, the Wirrn are driven out of their own galaxy and forced to drift in the universe. One queen ended up in the Mutter's Spiral and discovered the frozen survivors of an irradiated Earth in the Ark. Though the queen was killed by a security device, it was able to implant an egg into one of the humans. Eventually the larvae escaped and was able to infect another human called Noah. The Wirrn intended to use the sleeping humans as a food source to gain their advanced knowledge and help them take over the empty Earth. However, Noah's human side reasserted itself, and he led the Wirrn into the Ark's transport ship, even though he knew it was rigged to explode. In the 8th Doctor audio adventure Wirrn Dawn, human colonists in Wirrn space began sacrificing one of their number to have Wirrn queens gestated inside them. Due to the influence of human minds on the queens, peace was achieved between the two species. Following the expansion of Galsec and their takeover of these existing colonies, however, the sacrifices were ended. As a result, a huge and vicious war erupted between the human and Wirrn, lasting for generations. The Wirrn also appear in two other audios, Race Memory, produced by BBV, and Wirrn Isle, featuring the 6th Doctor, and produced by Big Finish.
Oh, goodbye, my dear chap. I must say I've had the time of my lives.
And that's all we have time for this week. Thanks again for listening, and if you're subscribed on iTunes, it would be great if you could leave me a rating and a review. Which reminds me, I'm seriously thinking of making the show iTunes only. Why? Well, for one thing, it would save me a not inconsiderable amount of time. It takes well over an hour to post to all the pages on Facebook that have been kind enough to like Theta Sigma's Doctor Who podcast. And for another, it would help me keep a more accurate record of listener numbers. So let me know what you think. And speaking of letting me know what you think, don't forget you can email the show at respectthething@hotmail.com, or leave your feedback on Theta Sigma's Doctor Who podcast on Facebook. It's always great to hear from listeners, not only as it proves the show has some, which is always a good thing, but also to hear your differing views on the issues raised in the show. So don't be backwards in coming forward with your thoughts. In next week's show, I'll be wrapping up the classic series Aliens run with a look at those reptilian cousins of the Silurians, the Sea Devils.
This is our planet. My people ruled the earth when man was only an ape.
Thank you for listening to Theta Sigma's Doctor Who podcast. Doctor Who and its associated shows are all copyright and property of the BBC, and no infringement is intended.